Bob Seeley's here. Very good morning to you, Bob.
Morning, Mike.
I don't know if you managed to see the Trump press conference live yesterday, but it was quite an extraordinary thing, wasn't it? As we were, I was actually in the car listening to it, thinking this is the kind of thing that people say in the pub, right? Yeah. And I know that there will be those, and there are those who say,
like him.
Yeah, and there will be those who say, you know, it was in bad taste and it was too soon and he shouldn't be doing it. But actually, he makes a very good point, doesn't he? He
does. I have to say that is the most orange I've ever seen him.
Yes, there's also that, yeah.
On this issue, is there a problem with diversity hires? Absolutely. Is there any evidence that diversity hire causes crash? No. There is evidence that not enough people may have been in the job at the time.
Yes.
So there's a staff shortage issue for sure. And you know, the New York Times and other mainstream US media have been talking about this quite a bit.
Yeah.
So
and he may know more than we know at this point as well. So I mean, it could well be. I mean, he certainly referred to a piece of legislation that the Biden administration brought in January the 14th, which allowed for people to be hired who had neurological difficulties, disabilities, mental problems.
And he read the list and it ended with dwarfism.
Yeah,
absolutely. But there is no evidence. I have to say, there is from everything I've seen in the papers, there's no evidence that actually that is the case here.
Right.
There is a problem with diversity hires because people are getting hired for the wrong reasons, for sure. And that's why this call for a colourblind meritocratic society, I think it echoes absolutely in America and absolutely here as well.
It does, because there's no question, is there, that we know for a fact that there are government departments, you'll know better than me, government departments which have hiring policies which are not based on meritocracy, which are not based on anything other than quotas, on, you know, ticking boxes and go, well, we better get a few of those people in, some of these people over here.
For sure.
And it needs to stop.
For sure. I mean, I'm not quite sure how this is going to go down, what he said, because if there is truth behind it, for sure. But if there isn't, then I think it's just going to give ammunition to his enemies. There's a broader point here that he's right on. However, there's no evidence that caused the crash.
I mean, the Mirror has done what you would expect the Mirror to do. I had a big headline called "Shameful," and they're quoting from people like, you know, Pete Buttigieg, who he personally singled out.
Well, Trump went for him yesterday and said, "This is all your fault, mate." Yeah,
right. He said, you know, he was in charge of the aviation business.
I mean, with respect, the Mirror is just
The Mirror. I used to work for the Mirror, and I'm very happy to say that they are now a completely disgraceful operation and you know useless. Quite frankly, you know, there's no point in hiding the truth.
Exactly.
I mean, they are hopeless. But let's hear a few more from yesterday. Former air traffic controller Michael Pearson spoke to Fox News.
This is a preventable disaster. The system has been under attack due to DEI and the FAA bowing to wokeness since 2010, since the Obama administration.
And the thing about what happened, and again, we wait. I mean, because one of the things he did say as well, he said, you know, if this was Keir Starmer, he'd be asking for another inquiry, wouldn't he? Because that's what they do at Labour. They just want to do more inquiries. And 3 years down the road, you don't really find out very much more.
Unless it's on grooming gangs.
Than you knew now. Yeah, well, of course, doesn't like to do those. But at the end of the day, you know, a helicopter should never have been in that space. The plane was 400 feet, it would seem, from the runway, so it was really, really just about to land.
Okay, but this is one of the problems of that airport, which is why they've had accidents there in the past. It's a very tight...
I've been there many times,
a very tight run-in, and you've got a lot of military helicopters flying around as well. That helicopter should not have been on that flight path.
No.
But again, just reading all the papers, I think what might have happened is that the helicopter had eyes on the airplane behind the one that it hit, and then didn't realise because it was either blinded. Because if you're a pilot, again, just picking this up, if you're flying into a plane or towards a plane, you can't measure distance quickly when you can.
And they were wearing supposedly night vision goggles as well. And you know, I'm no expert. You know, I haven't been on that many helicopters. I've been on plenty of planes. But there's a piece of footage that I watched yesterday where you can see the helicopter coming from behind the plane, and it appears to just fly straight into it.
Exactly.
And they're given the instruction to follow it in, which is what you hear on the audio clip, which presumably means just keep your distance and stay behind a plane. But as you say, it seems mad to land a helicopter in the same flight path as a passenger
and have all
plane.
that traffic in the same vicinity.
Yeah, very, very strange indeed. Common sense is a word that we use here a lot, and of course we are the home of common sense, as you know, for a long time. Trump, when he made his inauguration speech, talked about common sense. Here he is talking about it again yesterday.
I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level.
It really is a fascinating sort of deconstruction of where we are. And again, as you said, Bob, people like to hear the way he talks because that's how they talk. You know, people would have been in the pub last night saying, how could this possibly have happened?
Yeah.
Did you know that they were hiring all these people who might not have been qualified to do the job? Etc., etc. You know,
but what happens if that's not the case in this case? I mean, that is a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
And this is the problem with Trump: is that you should take him seriously, but not always literally.
No, because what he does though is he raises issues. I mean, when he for example, talks about they're eating the cats, and everybody went mad and went, "That's ridiculous. Nobody's eating cats." You know, it may well be that one or two people did.
I think somebody did.
Yeah, somebody did. But what he did do was he focused everybody's attention on the Venezuelan drug gang problem, which happened to be in a Midwest town in North America. And people started talking about that, and that was why I won the election. So, you know, there's a method in his madness, if you know.
No, I mean, the guy, obviously, there must be a method because he's won a second election after nobody thought he was ever going to.
Yeah.
But I just think on this issue, you're right, though. The Trump defies political logic that he can get away with saying something that maybe had no basis in truth because, A, it's a point that he wants to make. There is a wider issue. I'm just not sure the wider issue is necessarily reflected in this. But sure, if you're hiring people for government jobs and they can't do the job and they're a diversity hire, that is an insult both to the taxpayer, but actually it goes back to this thing I was reading last week, Oxford University now. It's basically saying if you're ethnic minority, we're going to dumb down.
Right.
I'm sorry, that is pure racism.
It is. Totally.
Well, I mean, why we're actually going back to a highly racist society because anti-racism is anti-white, and Oxford are basically saying if you're an ethnic minority, we'll assume you're not as intelligent as a white person. I mean, how incredibly offensive and stupid is that? And rightly, people were then calling it out and saying, wow, that is incredibly racist thing you're saying.
Right. But then if you look, pretty much every week we can find a story where the BBC put a job ad in whichever place they put it, asking for only ethnic minorities to apply for a particular job. White people need not apply. It's as simple as that. And you think, well, hang on a minute. If you said black people should not apply for a job, what do you think would happen?
We're going back to the 1950s.
Yeah. It's just crazy.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Common sense, though, is spreading, and I take the credit for it, obviously, as I would. You would expect that. Last night on Question Time, which gets worse and worse and worse, by the way, I sort of put myself through it every Thursday night. I have to go to bed.
You're a brave man. I've given up.
I gave up on it a long time, but the only reason I watch it now is because I can watch it slightly earlier, because you can watch it early on the iPlayer, so I don't have to stay up so late. But here's James Murray, who apparently is a government minister. God knows how.
Did you see the guy who runs Ryanair, O'Leary?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He was
slated.
fantastic.
Absolutely slated. Have you got that clip?
We have got that clip. We'll find it, actually. Yeah, we played it yesterday.
That will cheer us up in the morning.
It will cheer us up. I called him a git, which was brilliant.
And Rachel Rubbish.
Yeah, Rachel Rubbish.
And there was a poll on Twitter yesterday. Do you call Rachel from accounts? Is it Rachel from accounts or Rachel Rubbish?
Yeah.
And Rachel with accounts was just winning out.
Right, and she hates that apparently. Here's James Murray. Even he apparently thinks common sense is the way forward.
I think when you talk about the programmes around the diversity, equality, inclusion programmes, I really think this is where we could do with a bit of common sense because, you know, I think people understand there is a value to having an inclusive approach to your workforce and making sure people have opportunities, but you don't want it to go too far. And I think it is just a common sense question here where most people have a reasonable view on this.
I don't know what he means by that.
I don't know what he means.
Complete gobbledygook.
But this is the problem. If you're having a DEI policy, it means that you're not hiring. You're either not hiring the most talented because you're deliberately hiring whites or blokes or whatever, and so it doesn't actually make sense. If you're doing the right thing, you don't need a DEI program.
Right.
So DEI program is an admission of failure on somebody's part. So why have it?
Yeah, and Alison Phillips was on there from the former editor of the Mirror, funnily enough, who I used to work with, who said, oh, well, we need diversity and inclusion policies because when I started in Fleet Street, you know, it was mostly white middle-aged blokes. Absolute rubbish. Complete rubbish. I mean, I've been in Fleet Street longer than her, right? Yeah. And there were women running newspapers, there were women running features departments, news departments. There's always been very powerful women in newspapers doing very, very good jobs. Unfortunately, she wasn't one of them. You know.
I mean, when I started doing shifts on the Sunday Mirror a long time ago, we had a female editor.
Yeah.
I remember her name in a minute.
Yeah, it was probably Eve Pollard, was it?
It was Eve Pollard.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and Eve Pollard's a fine woman. She's a fantastic. She was a fantastic editor, and she certainly didn't need any help from men to get to where she was. Thank you very much indeed. Married to Sir Nicholas Lloyd, who was also editor of the Daily Express at the same time. Who used to be very frightened of her, but that's another story. Here's Michael O'Leary. We played it yesterday.
Yes,
I mean, we could play it every day from now to Christmas.
We should.
To be honest, here we go.
I get a letter back this week from some dopey junior minister, James Murray, who's the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. He helpfully told me that actually the rate of APD increase is only going up by £2 for those flying short-haul economy. That is 1% of an average airfare. £2 is 1% of an average short-haul economy low fare. I don't know what airline this dopey git actually flies on that has economy airfares of £200, but the £2 is not 1% of an average airfare, but it probably shows you just how out of touch Her Majesty's Treasury are with reality.
Well, I tell you what he's not doing. He's not flying on private jets, because the story that Guido did yesterday about David Lammy spent nearly £1 million.
Yep, he spent £1 million on, and the Labour Party, the amount of criticism that Rishi got for half a dozen flights on a helicopter. Yes. And he's clocking up the air miles on private jets. But just on the O'Leary thing, I mean, it just showed the thinking of government. And actually, if you look at that letter, and the letter that O'Leary got back from the government saying, well, you know, it's an irrelevant amount because it's only 1%. Right. And actually, O'Leary says that, but if you look at the price of a ticket, it's not 200 quid, it was 44 quid.
And so another £2 is quite a lot.
Tax is already 13 quid. Yeah. Tax is now 15 quid on a £44 fare. And he's absolutely right. And this is a problem with the government's growth. It talks about growth. Having kicked the living hell out of the economy last year, it's now in a panic. They're talking about growth, and yet anything and everything they're doing seems to be anti-growth, and the stuff they could do to help growth, they won't do.
No, and they seem to believe that the only way to get growth is to spend public money, which is, one, not their money, and two, it's our money, and three, it doesn't necessarily stimulate anything.
No, it doesn't. Well, it stimulates rich from accounts. But
well, it does. We've got a great clip of her, actually, which we'll do in a minute.